Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The morning sun bathed the city in a golden light, but for Nina Johnson this day didn't start like any other. A 32-year-old black woman, independent and respected in her neighborhood, she was on her way to work at a well-known communications firm. Her colleagues described her as meticulous, calm, and determined, capable of handling stress with exemplary serenity. As she drove along the main avenue, a police vehicle appeared behind her, siren off. The officer Mark Reynolds, white, tall, and with a cold gaze, signaled her to stop. For no apparent reason, he ordered her to get out of his vehicle. Nina felt a surge of injustice. She was unfortunately all too familiar with the suspicious look some people gave her, simply because of the color of her skin. But this time, she wasn't going to stay silent. With one hand, she discreetly pulled out her phone and pressed record. She knew the truth had to be documented. This simple act would transform what seemed like a trivial incident into a national affair. Nina didn't yet know that the day that was beginning would not only reveal the latent racism of a police officer, but also the power of a woman determined to defend herself and protect her dignity. Nina Johnson had barely walked a few meters past the police stop when she saw the officer Mark Reynolds approach her car. His cold, scrutinizing gaze left no doubt, he didn't see her as a citizen, but as a potential suspect. "Good morning, madam. Is there a reason you're driving so fast this morning?" Reynolds asked, his voice cold. Nina, calm but firm, replied. "Good morning, officer. I wasn't speeding. I was just going to work." But Reynolds wasn't listening. He abruptly pulled her out of the vehicle. His gestures were authoritarian, almost humiliating. Passers-by began to gather, intrigued by the scene. "Take out your ID and driver's license. Now," he ordered, his tone full of condescension. Nina obeyed, but silently, calmly taking out her wallet. Behind her polite smile, an idea formed in her mind: she was going to film everything. She discreetly took out her phone and started recording. Reynolds's every move, every word, would be captured. The agent, self-assured and blinded by his own prejudice, had no idea he was under surveillance. He continued to ask absurd questions and look down his nose at her, implying that she didn't belong in this city. "You seem nervous. Are you hiding something?" he asked with a sarcastic smile. Nina kept her calm and replied, "No, officer. I'm not hiding anything. I'm just going to work." At this point, Reynolds, irritated by her apparent calm, raised his voice and tried to intimidate her further. But Nina, by remaining firm and filming every moment, knew that she now held a power that he, through arrogance, did not possess. This simple gesture would transform a public humiliation into irrefutable proof, capable of changing the course of his day, and much more. As Officer Reynolds continued his intrusive questions, Nina felt a slight tension rise in the crowd of passers-by. Some looked at her curiously, others suspiciously. But she remained motionless, her phone still in her hand, recording every word, every gesture. "Why do you keep smiling, madam?" Reynolds asked, irritated by her apparent calm. "Because I respect the law, officer," Nina replied with a serenity that contrasted with Reynolds's aggression. She knew every word, every micro-expression, would be important. In this kind of situation, remaining calm wasn't just a matter of dignity, it was a protective strategy. The police officer, blinded by his own arrogance, didn't realize he was filming himself in a compromising situation. Nina felt a mixture of anger and determination then. She didn't want this incident to remain a silent humiliation. She had seen too many times black people suffer injustices without evidence, and she refused to let that happen. "Officer, I have given you all the requested documents. May I return to my work now?" she asked, polite but firm. Reynolds, frustrated, tried to raise his voice and make her tremble with his threats. But Nina didn't budge. She kept her phone pointed at him, ready to prove to the world what he had just done. Every second that passed made the incident more dangerous for Reynolds and more powerful for Nina. She knew that the moment she released the video, public opinion would turn against him. Her dignity and courage were now silent but formidable weapons. As Reynolds continued his interrogation, tension rose in the street. Some passers-by stopped to watch, their gazes oscillating between concern and anger. A few whispered among themselves, but none dared to intervene in the face of the police officer's displayed authority. "You think you can challenge me, ma'am?" Reynolds snapped, his face red with frustration. Nina didn't respond with words, but with her implacable calm. Her phone continued to record every gesture, every condescending word. She knew that true strength lay in proof. Reynolds, blinded by his authority, forced Nina to stand in the scorching sun, hurling demeaning remarks at her about her ability to follow the law and implying that she didn't belong in this neighborhood. His arrogance was palpable, and every sentence he uttered increased the tension in the crowd. A passerby finally dared to intervene. "Officer, she is behaving very properly. Why this treatment?" Reynolds ignored the man, believing his position of authority was enough to intimidate the crowd. But Nina, by remaining calm and filming, was already beginning to reverse the power. The situation that had seemed humiliating to her became public proof of Reynolds's abuse of power. The police officer, frustrated by his inability to destabilize her, then attempted one last provocation. "I could arrest you for insubordination, but you know what? I won't do that, right now." Nina, unperturbed, put her phone away slightly, implying that she had already recorded everything. She knew Reynolds didn't realize he had just sealed his own fate. This moment, though brief, would soon reverberate around town and forever change the public's perception of this arrogant agent. The humiliation he inflicted on Nina would backfire spectacularly. Once the altercation was over, Nina retrieved her documents and calmly put her phone back in her bag. She had taken care to record every moment, every humiliating word Reynolds said. Once she arrived at the office, she took a few minutes to replay the video and make sure everything was perfectly clear and in focus. Without wasting any time, she posted the video on her social media and sent it to a few trusted journalists. Within an hour, the video began circulating at an incredible speed. The reactions poured in: anger, outrage, support for Nina, and condemnation of Reynolds' actions. "Unbelievable. This needs to be known," commented one of the users. "This is the kind of racism we must denounce," added another. The local media quickly picked up the story. The video made headlines in several newspapers and television stations, and the entire city witnessed Officer Reynolds' intolerable behavior. Internet users were unanimous: Nina had acted with courage and composure, while the police officer had lost all credibility. At the police station, Reynolds learned that his video was already circulating online. Fury and disbelief were evident on his face. He could no longer ignore the implications of his actions. The same authority he had believed he had imposed on Nina was now turning against him. Meanwhile, Nina received messages of support from colleagues, friends, and even complete strangers. She knew she had just created something bigger than a simple incident, a public testament, a symbol of resilience and dignity. This virality would soon force Reynolds to face the consequences of his actions, and it was already setting the stage for justice and truth to triumph. When Reynolds first saw the video on social media, his blood ran cold. Every move, every humiliating word spoken toward Nina was now visible to thousands, if not millions, of people. He realized, too late, that his arrogance and racism had been captured forever. His superiors were quickly informed of the incident. The officer felt the pressure mounting, calls from the police station, journalists, and even members of the community demanding an explanation. Reynolds realized then that his career was in jeopardy and that his reputation had suffered an irreversible blow. Alone in his office, he thought over his actions and words. The innuendos, the humiliations, everything was now exposed. The anger and frustration he had projected onto Nina turned against him, and he began to feel genuine guilt, for the first time in a long time. "How could I have been so blind?" he muttered to himself. "And now, how do we fix this?" He also understood that his belated apology would be scrutinized by everyone, and that only a real change in his behavior and actions could allow him to regain a modicum of credibility. But he knew that the video would never disappear, and that the entire world now had direct evidence of his racism and abuse of power. Meanwhile, Nina continued to receive messages of support. She knew that the situation had become bigger than her. This was a moment of public justice, a demonstration of the power of truth and resilience in the face of injustice. Agent Reynolds had just discovered a valuable, painful, but necessary lesson: dignity and justice cannot be ignored, and every act of humiliation leaves a mark that can turn against you. A few days after the incident, under pressure from the media and his superiors, Reynolds was forced to issue a public apology. A press conference was held, and he stood in front of the cameras, his face marked by shame and nervousness. "I wish to apologize to Ms. Nina Johnson for my unacceptable behavior. I recognize that my actions were offensive and unfair," he said in a trembling voice. Despite the words, Nina, who was attending the conference via a live stream, remained cautious. The apology was a first step, but it wasn't enough to erase the humiliation she had suffered or guarantee that such acts would never happen again. She knew that true justice required concrete action and systemic change. The next day, Reynolds asked to meet Nina in person. In a neutral office, he looked down and whispered, I'm really sorry. I have no excuse. I acted out of ignorance and arrogance." Nina calmly replied, "Your apologies are heard. But it is not only to me that you must answer. It is to the community, to all those who suffer these humiliations, and to yourself to understand your mistakes." She then extended her hand to him, not out of friendship, but out of respect for the truth and to mark the end of their direct confrontation. Reynolds, squeezing it briefly, felt for the first time the true weight of his actions. The incident, now public, became a symbol. Even in the face of power and arrogance, courage and dignity can transform humiliation into a powerful message of justice. Nina's video and Reynolds's public apology sparked a massive outpouring of support. Messages poured in from all sides: colleagues, friends, citizens, and civil rights groups. Everyone wanted to express their outrage at the officer's behavior and support Nina in her pursuit of justice. Rallies were held throughout the city. Protesters held placards with messages such as, "Justice Poor Nina Johnson. Stop racism in the police." Local and national media covered the event, giving the case even greater visibility. Pressure on the police department and Reynolds reached critical levels. Citizens demanded concrete sanctions and reform of discriminatory practices. Meanwhile, Nina stood back, watching the mobilization with quiet determination. She knew her courage had inspired hundreds, perhaps thousands, of people. Each message of support reinforced her conviction that truth and justice could triumph even in the face of power and arrogance. Specialized organizations contacted her to help her turn this incident into a landmark case in the fight against systemic racism in the police. Together, they began planning actions to raise awareness among law enforcement and the public, so that such abuses never go unpunished. The city, shaken by this event, began to understand that every citizen has the power to denounce injustice. And for Nina, this moment marked the beginning of a larger fight for dignity and fairness. The shockwaves of the incident quickly rippled through the police department. Officer Reynolds was suspended pending the outcome of the internal investigation. His once promising career now seemed in jeopardy. Colleagues and superiors who had previously respected him began to view him differently, some with contempt, others with concern for their own image. In the media, his name was associated with abuse of power and racism. Articles, broadcasts, and online debates focused on the officer's unacceptable behavior and the importance of law enforcement accountability. Reynolds realized more and more each day that Nina's video was not just evidence, but a symbol, a public reminder that no one is above justice. Meanwhile, Nina continued to receive messages of support and appreciation. She was invited to participate in panel discussions on civil rights and ways to combat police abuse. Her courage inspired hundreds of people, and she became a living example of the power that civic vigilance can bring. Reynolds, for his part, was faced with the reality that his apology, while public, was not enough to erase his actions. To regain even a semblance of credibility, he needed to demonstrate real change, not only in his behavior but also in the way he interacted with the community. The incident transformed an individual humiliation into a powerful force for reform and awareness. Nina, through her calm and determination, had proven that a courageous act, even in the face of injustice, can change the course of a life, and even of an entire community. The video Nina had recorded became more than just evidence of injustice, it became a symbol of courage and transparency. Newspapers and social media rehashed Reynolds's images and words over and over again, highlighting just how unacceptable his behavior was. Every word, every humiliating gesture he had inflicted on Nina, was now circulating throughout the city and beyond. Reynolds, isolated and humiliated, realized that his authority was now shaken. Citizens were no longer afraid to denounce abuses, the evidence was there, tangible and irrefutable. Even his colleagues began to treat him with distance, some refusing to support him publicly. The video had redefined the balance of power. For Nina, the situation demonstrated the importance of remaining vigilant and prepared in the face of injustice. Her simple act, secretly filming, had given the community a powerful tool to stand up for the truth. She received messages from people sharing similar experiences and expressing gratitude for showing that it was possible to protect oneself and make one's voice heard. The incident also transformed public perceptions of the police. Citizens began demanding greater transparency, anti-discrimination training, and strong sanctions for abusive behavior. Nina's video was used as a reference in several training programs, demonstrating in concrete terms how abuse of power could be effectively documented and reported. So what began as a humiliation became a universal lesson: evidence, vigilance, and courage can change the course of a life and positively influence an entire community. A few weeks after the incident, Officer Reynolds was facing the final consequences of his actions. His suspension had been extended, and a full investigation was underway to determine whether he could return to his job. His once promising career was now marred by a public humiliation that nothing could erase. Nina, for her part, continued her professional life with the same determination, but now accompanied by a visibility she had never imagined. Interviews, conferences, and calls for support allowed her to share her experience and encourage others to take action in the face of injustice. At a local ceremony on transparency and the fight against discrimination, Nina spoke. "This experience taught me that courage lies not only in confrontation, but in preparation and lucidity. We all have the power to defend our dignity, and every act of truth counts." The video she shot, and the way she acted with calm and determination, became a symbol for the entire city. Reynolds had learned, too late, that power based on intimidation and discrimination cannot stand up to the light of truth. This story reminded everyone that justice and dignity cannot be ignored. Every citizen has the capacity to document, bear witness, and take action. Through her courage, Nina Johnson transformed personal humiliation into a force for collective change, leaving a lasting mark on her community and inspiring those fighting injustice. The racist police officer had been exposed, his career compromised, and the message was clear: truth and courage always triumph, even in the face of arrogance and discrimination.